My aunt dated a murderer. First, let me set up some background to make the flow of the story smoother. This happened almost 19 years ago. I was nearly 13 years old, and I was being raised by my grandparents. We lived in a little tourist town in Florida. They had problems with their two daughters as adults, my mother being the older of the two, and they wanted to do everything that they could to make sure that I didn't turn out the same way, a do-over if you will. So, needless to say, they were very, very strict. My aunt was having a good period. She had her stuff together. We were all very, very close. My aunt understood what it was like to be raised under a glass dome, metaphorically speaking. They raised her too, after all. So, being as she was my only aunt, she made sure that the time we spent together was always super cool. I would stay over Saturday nights, we would go out and hang out at the pier, and she would let me hang out with my middle school boyfriend, who would find ways to get to wherever I was. My grandparents had no idea of any of these activities, of course. I was just spending some quality time with my aunt and giving them a break. It was nice that I had a younger female figure, since my mom wasn't around. One night when we were out having fun, my aunt meets this guy, and they really hit it off. He was very nice and introduced himself to me. He went to JR, and at first was kinda a charming talker. They exchanged numbers after hanging out a while, and then we went home and went to bed. They ended up going out a bit more, and my aunt really liked JR. He took her to his home and introduced her to his father, and showed her around his land. He lived out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. I have lived in this town for 30 years, and I still to this day couldn't tell you where it is. I was only there once. He was teaching my aunt how to shoot a gun. I remember her shoulder rocking back with the impact of the shot, and it surprising her. He had these weird flamenco dancing clothes in his closet. It was all seemingly harmless. I mean, everyone has their quirks. About 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, we were again at the pier, out by the payphones talking about what to do that night and what to get for dinner. JR and my aunt were in their late 20s and early 30s, and as much as she loved me, I imagine there were times that I got in the way. Well, anyways, we were at the pier, and he's talking about how he has these painkillers. He offered me one. I declined, of course, and told him I had a high tolerance to pain anyways, and didn't need that stuff. He then, with a huge smile, asked me if he can see for himself, assuring he won't really hurt me. He was just trying to have fun. This bastard twists my arms behind my back until I hear a pop. I start to cry, and he laughs and says, "Ah, sweetheart, I was only playing. You said you have a high tolerance. I guess I was stronger than I thought I was being. I'm sorry. No need to ruin the good time we're all having." I go in the private pier office, which my granddad managed, crying. My aunt comes in and lets me know that she thinks it's fucked up too, and that she talked to him about it. She goes back outside, and he asks her what she's up to that night. She tells him that she isn't sure if I'm staying over because of what just happened. I was whining about going home. I was pissed that she hadn't decked him right there for hurting me. Well, he tells her that she should meet him under, let's call it the Sunset Bridge, at 2 a.m. on the other side of town. He says that the stars are beautiful, and you can listen and hear the fish. He tells her he would love to see it with her, and they can dance under the moon. We were all from a fishing family and live in a fishing town, so fish activities under the bridge at late times wasn't necessarily something that threw up a red flag. If it's dark and late, there won't be people there hogging all of the fish. She tells him maybe and we leave. I decide to spend the night after all, later sneaking in only if she'll pick up my boyfriend Charlie, playing up on guilt points. She calls him when she gets home and says she can come, but she'll have me with her. He groans and's like, fine, alright. I guess she can come to maybe. She'll get tired and sleep in the car. About an hour after, she called JR the first time. I asked her about Charlie and she agrees. She sits down with me and hugs me and touches my face lovingly, apologizing for what happened with my arm. My aunt was an amazing woman and I love her very much. She then calls him again and tells him not to worry. She is picking up Charlie, so I'll have my own entertainment, and they can have their time. He goes into a rage and starts sputtering and cussing about how it's too complicated now, and he just wanted an intimate meeting with her, not a damn family reunion. He went on about how he didn't want to have to babysit a 13-year-old kid and her 14-year-old boyfriend. He hangs up after calling her a crazy bitch. She bewilderingly hangs up the phone and tells me what happened. We go about our night with pizza rolls and PlayStation and things are fine. He calls her a few more times and drives by the house for a couple weeks, but my aunt was having none of it. After a while, he left our lives just as swiftly as he had came. The whole affair lasted only a month, if even that. 3 weeks maybe, and all in all, it wasn't the craziest experience she's had with a man. JR was soon forgotten, and we went about our business. Flash forward 2 years later, I am almost out of middle school. My aunt had moved to a city about 40 miles away. I still live with my grandparents. To be honest, they were still strict, but they had gotten older, so had I. I knew a few ways around the rules. One day, my friend Frank and I missed the bus home from school and called our good high school friend Darla to pick us up and take us home after riding a bit. She had this big, beautiful red truck, and I would ride around in the cab of loving the freedom and the wind. We were smoking cigarettes and laughing, listening to the radio. The time I would have spent on the bus before my stop was just enough time to hit up the taco drive-thru. We cruised down the road a bit before heading back to Frank and I's separate houses. He lived just down the road, to be honest. We had a lot of fun that day. She dropped me off at first. My grandparents came outside. They were heavily confused at the sight of an unknown vehicle, and even more so when they saw that I had gotten out of it. After letting her be the one to explain because she was older, cooler, and more responsible, my parents thanked her for being kind enough to take me home. They said how lucky I was that she had just happened to be there to help get me home. The things we do to our parents, eh? That was the last time we ever saw my friend. She didn't show up for work for 5 days. I can't speak for everyone, but I assumed she had just ran away. Darla's parents were going through a nasty divorce. The dad had a hot new girlfriend, and the mother was very bitter about it, rightfully so, I guess. It was embarrassing for all the kids. Her truck wasn't left behind. I figured she got tired, and her parents acting like infants and took off. I missed her, but she was in a whole different league of freedom and coolness. 16 is a whole lot different life than 14, especially when you are in different schools. I wished her well, maybe even a little envious that she got out of this town, and I was still stuck here. I hadn't heard anything for about 2 weeks about her, when at about 9 at night, my grandparents got a phone call to turn on the news. Darla's body was found in the what? She had been strangled to death and just left out there. I don't even know for how long. I was devastated. I was so saddened and horrified. She was so young, barely older than myself. She was about to be 17 in just a short time. It was a very sad time for our town. The good and bad news is that they had caught the guy that had done it. He confessed after some very incriminating evidence, and during his questioning, also confessed to killing his girlfriend, who had been missing for about 8 years, and also his father, staging his death to look like a suicide by hanging. When they showed me his mugshot on the screen and said his name, I swear I almost passed out. There, clear as day on the screen staring back at me, was a picture of JR. I had no idea they even knew each other. I can't even imagine what would have happened if we had gone under the bridge that night. Investigation Discovery Channel did a piece on it a couple years back. I was shocked to see it on TV. The memories came rushing back, and decided to write them all down. I literally have a newfound appreciation of life now that I'm old enough to understand just how close I could have been to being killed. My aunt lived on to make new awesome memories with me. I have a beautiful life with my husband and 3 boys that most likely wouldn't have happened if things had gone differently that night. Feel free to message if you have any questions. My sister looked over to see him holding my hand. So this is the second post I've made on here, and I guess I must just look like someone who is good to kidnap, because this is also the second attempt at kidnapping story. For reference, I'm 22 and a female. I'm also very small and have always been small my entire life. So when I was around 7 or 8 years old, and my brother, who is a year younger than me, was between 6 or 7, my sister came to visit. My sister is actually 15 years older than me, and she wanted to spend the day with my brother and I, so she took us to a bigger city about 45 minutes away that had much more to do. We ended up going to the river, and the place we went was interesting. It's a very popular spot, and it is in the middle of town, so it's relatively safe. It's actually in a U shape, So usually when people bring their kids, they're at the tip of the U because that's where the water is safest. So my sister didn't really want to swim, but my brother and I did. So we put on our little swimsuits and ran in. Not too long after we were playing around, a man came over to me. I've never been one to judge, but little me thought he looked dirty and smelled gross. He was basically totally naked, except for some ratty underwear, which I didn't think was a big deal at the time. The man came over to me and said, "Hi, pretty girl, how are ya?" And I've never been taught stranger danger. I lived a pretty sheltered life. So I thought the man just wanted to be friends. He asked for a hug, and whenever anyone asked me for a hug, I would give them one. So after hugging me, he grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go. He then says, "Is this your brother?" I said yes, and he said something along the lines of, "You're both so pretty." He was still holding my hand tightly, and he was like, "How would you guys like to go on an adventure?" And my brother and I were excited, because we didn't understand that we would not like this adventure. He said, "Okay, you just have to come with me, but let's make it a surprise for your mom." And I said she's my sister, and he said, "Even better," which I still don't understand. He started to pull me away from my sister, who had looked away, because someone she knew had stopped to say hello to her, and he told my brother to come along. All of a sudden, I hear my sister scream my name so loud, everyone within earshot looked over. She started yelling things like, "Let go of my sister, you son of a bitch, and I'm calling the cops, you perv, give her back." Things along that nature. Other parents who were around were grabbing their kids as a precaution, but some seemed like they were ready to help if the guy put up a fight. My sister, who was not in a swimsuit, ran into the river to pull me out of his grip, and she grabbed my brother's hand while carrying me away. And she decided that she didn't want to let a creepy dude ruin mine and my brother's fun. She let us go to a different part of the river in the same area that was still very popular and had lots of kids and families. My sister was sitting and watching us, and we were not too familiar from her when I said, "Hey, look, it's my friend," and my sister lost it on the dude. He literally tried to say to her, "Come on, I'll watch the kids. You go shop for a few hours, and you can have them back when you're done. I'll have fun taking care of them." And she told him he was a sick bastard, and he was going to regret touching me if he ever tried it again. He once again tried to convince her to let him take me, and he was edging his way over to me and my brother again. So my sister punched him in the face, and then kicked him in the leg, and told him he would get a lot worse if he dared to do anything else. We told a police officer, but they said it was probably just a homeless man, and there was nothing they could do about it. So my sister got my brother and I ice cream, and we felt better about having to leave early. My dad was not happy when the first thing we told him was that my sister beat up a guy, but he was even more furious when he learned what happened. So, creepy guy trying to take my brother and I. Well, I'm guessing I'm a little too old for you now, so I guess it doesn't really matter if we meet again. Hopefully we never will, though.